So actually, in the last session, we discussed about relative pronouns and how is it used. Today, we'll talk about one interesting topic, which is count and non-count nouns. I think the reason for selecting this topic is we often in verbally or written format, we often use count and non-count nouns. And they actually have certain kind of rules when we use count and non-count nouns along with certain adjectives and certain other things. So I thought we could practice this thing. So before I talk about count and non-count nouns, I have a few questions for you. I'd just like to know, of the two statements which you see in this slide, which one do you think is right?
First one.
First one. Okay.
First one.
Okay.
Because the few you use it for the countable things.
Right.
Some is typically used for the non-countable things.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what about this one?
It should be much homework.
Okay.
Instead of many.
Okay. What about this one?
The first one. Yeah.
Okay. So any other answers? Okay. So actually, both of these statements are actually correct. So there are a few cats, as I mentioned, a few is actually used for countable nouns. That is true. And if you see here, there are some cats. Some is actually an adjective. It is highlighting the nouns. It is magnifying the number of this thing. Some or any, these are two specific kind of adjectives which are used for countable and as well as non-countable nouns as well. Mostly it is used for non-countable nouns, but there are certain situations where it becomes relevant there also. We'll see how. If you see here, as you mentioned, this is much actually, because many used for a countable noun and much is actually used for uncountable noun. In this case, homework is uncountable noun, unless until if we say it in terms in certain units. And if you see in this case, both of these statements are actually correct. There is some juice. Some is an adjective. It is talking about the noun. It is highlighting the noun. If you see in the first sentence, there is some juice on the table. Juice is not measurable thing, unless until if you pour it in a glass and if you say glass, 5 glasses of juice or something like that. So in this case, juice is actually an uncountable noun because we haven't said it in terms of units. So some is the correct word here. And in case, but in the second example, if you see, when I say juices, I don't mean one particular juice. I mean different types of juices, that may be apple, orange, or this thing. So that is the reason why here also it becomes relevant. So just the context is different. Here I mean only one juice, but here I mean different types of juices, 5-6 types maybe, for example. So that is the thing here in this case. So in certain adjectives, actually they have a certain kind of rules where it makes them relevant for both countable and non-countable nouns. We'll see what are those rules. So to start with, we'll see the basic rules of count and non-count nouns. So basically a count noun is one which can be expressed in a plural form. A cat is measured in a plural form. Cats, 1 cat, 2 cat, 5 cats. Seasons are measured 1, 2, 3, which can be expressed in plural form. Students, chocolates, biscuits, or classes, student, etc. All these things which are countable. And in case of non-countable nouns, they cannot be expressed in a plural form. We cannot say milks unless until if there are 5 different kinds of milk, like cow milk or buffalo milk or goat milk, only in such cases. But usually milk, water, air, money, these are not expressed in the plural form. They are expressed in plural form only when they have an associating or some other adjoining kind of unit. For example, milk, if it is said in liters, 5 liters of milk, then 5 liters is what the liters are actually the countable one. Milk is not the one. So this noun is not a countable noun. It is a non-count noun. And water, same goes with water, and same goes with air and money. Money is measured only in terms of currencies. When you say it in rupees or dollars or yuan or something, then it is a measurable thing. But in general, money, basically we won't say give me many money. You would say how much money do you have. You won't say how many money you have. You will say how many rupees you have. So non-count nouns can be made countable nouns only when they are assisted by some measuring units, some units in terms, they are expressed in terms of some unit. So this is the thing. So we'll see some count and non-count nouns with adjectives here. So usually in most of the cases, as we know, adjectives main job is to highlight the noun. It qualifies the noun. So it gives more adequate information about the noun so that we can understand which context or what the noun is. So in this case, if you see the example here, the cat was gray. So basically it is talking about the cat. Cat is a countable noun. And here if you see the air was gray. Air is non-countable noun. It is not measured in, it is not expressed here in terms of units, but still the same adjective is being used. And sometimes adjectives might be similar, but sometimes it would be different. Here in this case, it is the adjectives can be same for both countable and non-countable nouns. However, there are certain situations where there are certain adjectives like some or any or much, many, little, few. These are certain kind of adjectives. In some cases, it doesn't really matter which adjective you are using. In certain cases, adjectives, depending upon the adjectives, depending upon the countable and non-countable nouns, adjectives changes. We'll see the first one, some or any. Some or any are actually used for countable and non-countable nouns both. If you see here, there is some water on the floor. There are some students here. We can both say there are some students. There are some students here in this class. It still becomes relevant here in this case. So some is an adjective, students or there is the noun. Water here is the noun. Here in this case, water is an uncountable noun. It is used some, basically, which we know. And in certain cases, for countable nouns like student also, some becomes relevant. And if you see any, it is used for food. Food is an uncountable noun. It is a non-count noun. If you see, do you have any food? We also said, do you have any apples? Apples here is a countable noun. Food is an uncountable noun. So it is used for both things. So some or any, there is no confusion. It is applicable for countable and non-countable nouns. But in case of others, there are certain some kind of distinguishment which makes it a bit different from others. If you see here, much is actually used only for the uncountable nouns. So whenever there is much, we should by heart that much is actually used for uncountable nouns and many is used for countable nouns. Which is, we'll see some examples here. So we don't have much time to get this done. We won't say we don't have many time to get this done. We would say much time. But in case of, if we measure, if we express the time in terms of hours, like some units. So for example, I would say how many hours you have. I would say how much hours you would have. If I say it in time with not expressed in some unit, you would say how much time do you have. I won't say how many time you would say. So basically time is uncountable noun. If it is not expressed in units, you should say much. In case if time is expressed in units like hours, minutes, something, then many would come. If you see the next example, many Americans travel to Europe. Americans is the noun here. It is a countable noun. So many is actually used, not much. So you won't say much Americans travel to Europe. We would say many Americans travel to Europe here. So that is the difference between the much and many, unlike the some or any. So much is used for uncountable nouns. Many is actually used for the countable nouns. And similarly, little, few. So little actually modifies only uncountable nouns. Few modifies uncountable nouns. Little modifies uncountable nouns. If you see the example here, the first one, he had little food in the house. The doctor had little time to think in the emergency room. So little is actually talking about the food. Food is a uncountable noun. Here in this case, time is the uncountable noun, and little is talking. It is qualifying the noun time. Here it is qualifying the noun food. So whenever the noun is uncountable noun, we use little to measure it or to express in terms of how much quantity it has. In case of few, it is used for only countable nouns. There are few doctors in town. Few students like exam. Few apples are rotten or such things. So little is actually used for uncountable nouns, and few is used for countable nouns. And we'll see some other other rules also which makes it different. So lots of, actually many times we use it and sometimes we get confused, but actually a lot of or lots of are very easy things because they are just an informal substitute of much or many. But the only extra rule is a lot of, lots of. Both are actually used for countable and uncountable nouns here. So if you see here in the examples, they have lots of money in the bank. Money is uncountable noun, so much has to be used. So you said lots of. Here in this case, a lot is not appropriate. Sometimes we don't use it, but there are certain situations where we use for much as well. We'll see them. A lot of Americans travel to Europe. So Americans is a countable noun. So many is actually is what we see. If you see in the previous example, you have seen that we said many Americans travel to Europe. So here in this example, instead of many, we said a lot of Americans travel to Europe. So basically it is taking the place of many. Here in this case, it is taking the place of much. And if you see the third example, we got lots of mosquitoes last summer. So if you see, a lot of is actually used here, lots of is actually used. So both lots of are actually used for many and much, depending upon the situation. So actually they are used for both, but in certain situations, a lot of is not relevant. So if you see the first example here, so much money in this case, we got lots of rain last summer. So rain is uncountable noun, so much has to be used, lots of. So very commonly, majorly, a lot of is actually appropriate or suitable for countable nouns. Lots of S, which is this one, a lots of is actually suitable for uncountable nouns, but very few such situations come where we can use both of them in here. But in generally, a lot of is actually used for countable nouns and lots of is actually used for uncountable nouns. So this is a thing, but both of them are actually informal substitutes of much or many. The reason why they are informal is much or many gives adequate information about the noun, unlike the a lot of, lots of. So they are used informally, but in case if we are talking in a formal situation or atmosphere, we used many, much, majorly, because that gives much clarity and adequate information about the noun. So there are certain other things like a little bit. So always a little bit is used for uncountable noun and it always precedes the noun. If you see the example here, there is a little bit of pepper in the soup. Pepper is the noun here. So pepper is not measured. Here we are not saying it in grams. Here we are not saying it in kgs or any other terms, or 2 glasses or some 3 cups of pepper. We are not saying that way. We're just saying pepper, and pepper in general, it is not measured. It is an uncountable noun. So because we cannot measure it, so we cannot measure it in plural form. That is the thing. So a little bit is used because it is uncountable noun. If you see the second example, there is a little bit of snow on the ground. So in general, snow is not expressed in the plural form. We won't say snows. We won't say peppers unless until if there are different types of peppers. But in general, we use the same we actually refer to the pepper. So it is not expressed in plural form. That's the reason we use a little bit of. So the moment we see a little bit of, it is used for uncountable nouns. And if you see enough, it is used for both countable and uncountable nouns. You could say there is enough money to buy a car. There is enough water for 5 people, or I have enough books to read. So books is countable noun, money is uncountable noun. So enough is used for both, but a little bit of is actually used only for uncountable nouns. That is the case here with a little bit of and enough. If you see in continuation to the above one, a plenty of, so just like how we use enough, a plenty of is also used for countable and uncountable nouns. Just like enough, plenty of, you could say they have plenty of money in the bank. You could say there are plenty of millionaires in the Switzerland. Only thing is it is have or it is coming depending upon the quantity. So money is the uncountable noun, millionaires are countable noun. It is expressed in plural form. So you said there are plenty of millionaires, and in case of money, it is not expressed in plural form, but you still say plenty of money. So plenty of actually, it is a kind of adjective which modifies both countable and uncountable noun. That is the thing. And in case of no also, which is very commonly used, no also modifies both countable and uncountable nouns. So if you see, there is no time to finish. There are no squirrels in the park. So time is uncountable noun and squirrels are countable nouns. So plenty of, no, and enough. These three are used for both countable and uncountable nouns, but a little bit of and other things, they are actually used for different things. So we'll get deep into what are count and non-count nouns. So basic difference would be anything which is expressed in the plural form. So you can distinguish one object with the other object here. So which means if I say universe, only one universe, how would I differentiate? In case if I take one universe, how would I differentiate the elements in this thing? So is it possible we would say universe, if only in case if we talk about there are different galaxies, then we would say universes. But in general, universe is what we would say is uncountable noun. So any element, any object which can be distinguished from the other one, which is identical or another one, if we can distinguish the elements, that is what is expressed in plural form. So table, one table can be distinguished from the other one. Tables, fingers, because we can see the tables, we can see fingers, bottles. So these are expressed in plural forms. So girl, candidate, award, awards, remarks, chairs, bottles. So basically they are individual units. If they have 5-10 tables, you would say individual units, this is the case with countable nouns. And for some of the examples we would see here, I stepped in a puddle. You would say how many puddles? How many puddles were there? You would say just one, or there were two, or I just stepped in the first one. So basically it is measured in, it is expressed in plural forms. And in case if you say, I drank a glass of milk. Glasses of milk, glasses can be counted. 1 glass, 2 glass, 3 glass. But if you say, I drank milk, you would say, how many? You won't say how many milk did you drink. You would say how much milk, but not how many. Because in general, the milk elements are not distinguished from one another. It is a milk. Only if it is poured into different objects, then the one glass is differentiated with the other one. So anything which cannot be distinguished from the other one that becomes an uncountable noun, which is not expressed in plural unless until if it is measured in units. If you see, I saw an apple tree. Apple trees can be counted. You could say, oh, how many apple trees were there? You could say 3 or 4. That is the thing. And in case of non-count nouns, it refers to objects which cannot be counted, which is actually expressed as a whole thing. So if you say, if there is a batter of cake, you would say how many batters of cake? You would say the batter of cake only if the cake is made and if it is cut into pieces, then say piece of cake. Now pieces of cake can be measured, but batter cannot be measured. Batter becomes the uncountable noun, but cake becomes a countable noun because the one piece can be distinguished with the other piece. 1, 2, 3. If you make it into 8 pieces, this thing. But in general, batter, it is not measured. Only if it is poured into different one, the whole object, if it is poured into one, then it is distinguished. But in case batter is generally expressed as a whole item, not as a distinguished item. Only if there are different types of batters, like maida batter or wheat batter or something like that, then because it is different from the other batter, the nature or the quality, then it becomes a plural. But in case a single batter, one kind or quality of batter, it is not distinguished from one another unless until if we pour it in different cups. So batter is an uncountable noun. Cake pieces, the cake pieces which come, those are distinguished from each other. They are expressed in plural form, and that becomes countable noun. There are some examples which are there here for non-count nouns. We see anger. You would say how many angers are there. You won't say how many angers. You would say how much angry was he or something like that. He was very angry. He was so angry. He was extremely angry. You would express in such a way. Those kind of adjectives are used. This thing. You would say how many courages. You would say how much courage or that thing. Courage is an uncountable noun. Progress. You wouldn't say progresses. Furniture. You wouldn't say furnitures unless until if there are different types of furniture. Education, you would say education. You won't express it in plural form. Education is expressed as a whole item, or the whole element. And weather, you won't say weather unless until if the earth has different types of weathers, if you are referring to different types of weathers in different countries. But in general, weather is expressed as a whole item. you cannot distinguish the weather, or you can't break it into pieces or distinguish one weather from other, or warmth, leisure, precision. These are certain kind of nouns which cannot be expressed in plural form. These are non-count nouns. That is the thing. And if you see some of the example here, I dove into the water. Nobody will ask how many waters did you dive into, unless until if there are different rivers, if they are expressing water in terms of rivers, or how many rivers did you take bath in, that becomes a countable noun. But in case water, you won't say how many waters. It is not how it is expressed. It is wrong. So basically it is an uncountable noun. So we should say it as water is not expressed in plural form, and many does not become appropriate here. And you see, I saw the milk spill. How many milks is not the right word. You cannot say how many milks. Only if there are 4 or 5 glasses of milk, then say how many glasses of milk did you spill. That becomes appropriate. But in general, milk is not distinguishable item. It is expressed as a whole item because we cannot break it into pieces, the whole item. And I admired the foliage. You won't say how many foliages. It is not measured. It cannot be measured. So that is the thing with countable and uncountable nouns. And if you see some basic, one common rule, something which expressed in English might not be very relevant in other languages, because there are certain things in other languages which we also express in English as well. So for example, something I say in Telugu, if it is expressed in English, then this count and non-count nouns might not be relevant there. So it is basically rules are actually for the English. So something which are in the basic language and which are adopted by English, basically sometimes we see that the other language items are also added into Oxford Dictionary or made part of English as a commonly used term, but these rules might not be relevant for them. So these basic rules are actually very much relevant for the original English terms. That's what it is. These rules are made for or referred for. This is the case with count and non-count nouns, and there are certain other rules also in this thing. We'd see them in the further sessions. So does anyone have any doubts specifically to these count and non-count topics?
Surya, just one thing. You talked about that little and few, right?
Right.
So similarly, there is a difference between little and a little, and few and a few. And you can cover that in a different session.
Right, correct. Yeah, there is a difference between both of them, and we can talk about it in further session. So basically, sometimes a little or few is actually used for basically negligible items also, right, Sai?
Yeah, negligible. So one conveys a positive sense of meaning, saying something is there. The other conveys something like nothing is there.
Nothing is there. Yeah. Right. So we'll talk about a few, a little, and associated kind of nouns in the further sessions.